Berlin, March 31st, 1937. Spartacus Olsson reporting from the German capital. In the first quarter of 1937, the Nazi Party completed a decisive stage in its transformation of Germany from a regulated market economy into an ideologically controlled robber capitalist state. They also made one of their last major symbolic repudiations of Versailles by withdrawing Germany's signature from the War Responsibility Clause. Tonight, we look back at a quarter when the Nazis consolidated their power and lined their pockets while the average German continued to face food and goods shortages and stagnating quality of life. While Moscow staged another public purge sentencing 13 to death, Spain's civil war moved through Jarama, Malaga, and Guadalajara, and China's factions edged toward an anti-Japanese settlement after the Xi'an incident, in which Chiang Kai-shek was seized by Zhang Zhuiliang and Yang Hucheng and pressured towards a united front against Japan. Germany marked the quarter with a quieter act, the extension of the Enabling Act, the legal shell through which Hitler's dictatorship continued to operate under the appearance of constitutional procedure. They began with shoring up the loyalty of the machinery of state. The German Public Officials Law of January 27th required civil servants to stand in a service and loyalty relationship to Hitler and the Reich, serve the state based on the will of the Nazi Party, and support the National Socialist state without reservation. It also made German or kindred blood a condition for public office, with political unreliability grounds for retirement. On the 4th anniversary of his appointment as Chancellor, January 30th, Hitler addressed the Reichstag and formally rescinded the German signature on the war guilt clause of the Versailles Treaty. This symbolic act officially buried the hated peace settlement, solidifying Hitler's domestic popularity. In the same speech, he attempted to pacify international anxieties by declaring an end to Germany's era of diplomatic surprises and once again assuring the world of his peaceful intentions. They transitioned to the Enabling Act adopted in 1933 for 4 years. As it was now about to run out, the puppets in the Reichstag ratified a 4-year extension. Hitler's speech tied that renewal to jobs, order, race, and restored honor. However, the reality behind closed doors was that the Nazi leadership was continuing to aggressively lay the diplomatic and economic groundwork for expansion. In January, Hermann Göring traveled to Rome to meet with Mussolini, bluntly discussing the inevitability of an Austrian annexation. By contrast, the following month he went to Warsaw and reassured the Polish government that Germany had no interest or designs to seize Polish territory. Promises of less aggressive foreign policy was not the only smokescreen that Hitler laid in his speech. He also wrapped in confusion the regime's financial aims. The salvation of our folk is not a financial problem. It is exclusively a problem of utilizing and employing the available workforce on the one hand and exploiting available soil and mineral resources on the other. The Volksgemeinschaft does not subsist on the fictitious value of money, but on actual production, which gives money its value. This production is the primary cover for a currency, not a bank or a vault full of gold. And while he spoke these words, a new German corporation law was being published. The law weakened ordinary shareholder control, strengthened the management board, and made large firms still more useful partners in the 4-year plan for military autarky. While the industry further aligned, the Catholic Church tried to misalign in a rare coordinated public challenge to the regime's ever-increasing totalitarian control. On Palm Sunday, March 21, 1937, Pope Pius XI's encyclical Mit brennender Sorge, with burning anxiety, was read from Catholic pulpits across Germany, openly condemning the regime's continuous violations of the 1933 Concordat and its neo-pagan racial beliefs. It was a strong condemnation directed at the very heart of Nazi ideology. Whoever exalts race or the people or the state or a particular form of state or the depositories of power or any other fundamental value of the human community, however necessary and honorable be their function in worldly things, whoever raises these notions above their standard value and divinizes them to an idolatrous level, distorts and perverts an order of the world planned and created by God. He is far from the truth faith in God and from the concept of life which that faith upholds. The regime was none too pleased. The Gestapo moved to confiscate copies and investigate the presses and clergy involved. That was not the only thing Heinrich Himmler's police forces were up to. From February 27th to March 9th, the criminal police rounded up about 2,000 convicted repeat offenders and sent them to concentration camps. This is the first mass concentration camp roundup of people not defined primarily as political opponents. Simultaneously, the bureaucratic exclusion of Jewish Germans intensified through further regulation, strangulating their opportunities to gainful employment. What has also been permanently strangulated, according to Hitler, was factual education, journalistic independence, and artistic freedom of expression, or as he put it in his speech. Today, our entire German system of education, including the press, theater, film, and literature, is run and organized exclusively by German Volksgenossen. How often were we told before that removing the Judentum from these institutions must result in their collapse or deterioration? And what has happened now? In all of these areas, we are witnessing a tremendous flourishing of culture and artistic life. If by flourishing you mean aggressive pruning by ideological streamlining, he was correct. In the weeks and months following the Nazi seizure of power, approximately 2,000 German journalists were arrested, driven from their jobs, or forced into exile for political or racial reasons. At the universities, 1,145 out of 7,979 university professors have lost their jobs, primarily for Jewish ancestry or for having Jewish spouses. Up to a third of all academics have left Germany, a brain drain that includes 15 Nobel Prize winners, 11 of whom physicists. In the medical sciences, the number of Jewish doctors in Germany has plummeted from 8,000 at the beginning of the 1930s to only 3,300 by this year. Simultaneously, many Aryan doctors have been diverted to work in Nazi pseudo-medicines like racial hygiene and eugenics. The country now faces a shortage of medical personnel, with growing waiting times for essential treatments. Instead of caring for the actual needs of the members of the Volk, doctors now sit on 205 special eugenics courts to determine what racial heritage is ideologically desirable. Between 1933 and 1935 alone, they processed 100,000 sterilization applications and carried out over 56,000 forced operations. More than 2,000 Jewish artists have been forced to seek inadequate employment within segregated Jewish cultural organizations. Thousands more have left the country for fear of being persecuted for their opinions or ethnicity. The vibrant culture and scientific life in the lands of Hildegard von Bingen, Albrecht Dürer, Immanuel Kant, Ludwig van Beethoven, Albert Einstein, Max Ernst, Marlene Dietrich, and Fritz Lang has been turned into a vast monocultural plantation of sameness. What is unquestionably flourishing, though, are the profits reaped by the Nazi leaders and the capital elite. With the new corporate law, the captains of industry and finance have been rewarded with their own dictatorships inside their companies. Organized labor was already dismantled in 1934, and now small and medium shareholders have also been disenfranchised of insight and control, while majority owners and top management have been given the freedom to manipulate the books and secretly reap massive profits from the work they are doing to rearm Germany. This is not socialism. This is politically motivated private capitalism. Ownership and profit remain private, but state spending is used to control labor, credit, investment, and opportunity, and bend it towards rearmament, autarky, party patronage, and racial exclusion. Central to the idea is not nationalization of the economy. To the contrary, it depends on competition, capital gains, and private enterprise. Already at the beginning of their reign, the Nazi government launched a large privatization program selling government-owned businesses into private hands, generating on average 1.4% of the entire annual national budget. This plunder of the assets also stretches into the imagined racial enemies of the state. The most violent form is Aryanization. While Jewish property is not a significant enough part of the German economy to have any great national effect, for the Nazi old guard, local functionaries, and favored businessmen, it has become a field of competition to personally enrich themselves. Hitler, Göring, and Goebbels have seized businesses and stolen goods. Gauleiters are using extortion, blackmail, and the threat of concentration camp to take land, companies, and valuables. The corruption is so widespread that Hermann Göring has complained that even Gauleiter chauffeurs have enriched themselves with stolen Jewish assets worth 500,000 Reichsmark. Rearmament has deepened corruption in general. Military preparation has become a business opportunity for party bosses and compliant industrialists alike. The industrialists have accepted the bargain. The state allows private property because private profit drives efficiency, especially in armaments. Dividends are formally restricted to 6%, but companies may reinvest huge profits in their own firms or in government bonds. Undistributed profits have risen from 175 million marks in 1932 to several billion by 1937. If this system continues, they may soon reach 5 billion Reichsmark. The oligarchs help themselves to these profits while worker wages and labor rights remain suppressed. The four-year plan is thus reconciled with capitalism through a trade. The state stabilizes profits and reduces risk. Industry subordinates production to political and military goals. Since the market economy is still in place, albeit warped and distorted, business leaders fear that refusing state contracts merely allows competitors to take them. The numbers tell the story. Gustav Krupp's declared profits at Firma Krupp AG rose from 6.65 million Reichsmark in 1933 to 1934 to 11.43 million in 34-35, 16.68 million in 35-36, and 17.65 million in 36-37. IG Farben, under executives including Karl Bosch, Hermann Schmitz, Georg von Schnitzler, Fritz Termer, and Karl Krauch, saw net profits rise from 65 million Reichsmark in 1933 to 140 million in 1936. Gross profits reached 251 million Reichsmark that year, and in 1936 alone it distributed 55.4 million Reichsmark to shareholders, and so on, and so on, and so on. But at the center of all these confidence tricks stands Adolf Hitler himself. Exact annual figures for how much he is amassing are impossible to determine because his personal income and party funds are being kept secret, and shortly after becoming chancellor, he had himself declared exempt from taxation, so there are no recent tax returns to audit. In fact, his tax exemption ended a years-long conflict between him and the German revenue services, who had been trying to audit him and collect taxes in arrears. Publicly, he has refused his chancellor's salary and claims to make a modest living only from his riding. Privately, he is becoming immensely wealthy. His official source of income is in fact Mein Kampf. After years of meager sales, in his first year in office, the book sold 1 million copies, making him a millionaire. Sales continue to rise, and if the regime keeps pressing the book into German homes and institutions at the present rate, the total may run into many millions more. Beyond that, he profits personally, directly from his chancellorship. He even collects royalties from the use of his image on postage stamps, receives hidden speaking fees for his public and private addresses disguised as lavish expenses and calculated by audience size, and is paid handsomely for articles in the Völkische Beobachter and Illustrierte Beobachter, as well as for interviews with the foreign press. Then comes the slush funds. Industrialists have funneled money directly to Hitler and the Nazi leadership. Fritz Thyssen estimates such direct business contributions at 2 million Reichsmark annually, though the true figure is likely much higher. The Adolf Hitler Spende der deutschen Wirtschaft, created in mid-1933, forces corporations to pay a fraction of a percentage of their annual wage and salary bills to the party, generating 30 million Reichsmark in 1933-34 alone, and 23 million Reichsmark in the 1935-36 fiscal year. Since April 1936, the SA extorts the Dankopfer der Nation, the national thank offering, which proceeds are placed entirely at Hitler's personal disposal. By March 31st, 1937, the German economy is not merely rearming, it is paying a large group of oligarchs and Nazis very well to prepare for war, while many workers still face capped wages, shortages, poorer consumer choices, and a standard of living subordinated to rearmament. For the party top, on the other hand, things were looking up and they entered the quarter with confidence. It had another 4-year mandate in legal form. The civil service was tied tighter to Hitler, and the anniversary speech presented the regime as vindicated by achievement. Not even the Pope's attack could faze them, or as Goebbels stated on March 21st, "Let's stay calm and bide our time to oust these rabble-rousers." From the vantage point of the opposition, it looked like they had good reason to feel confident, as Victor Klemperer put it. Hitler is, after all, the chosen one of his people. I do not believe that he is in the least bit shaky. I am slowly beginning to think that his regime can really still last for decades. To the German general public, even to Hitler's critics, it looked like this quarter he fulfilled his promise to restore German national pride. The risks he took while doing that, through defense through strength diplomacy, led to widespread fear that his gambles would provoke a new war. But each time, he has gotten away unchallenged by the other European powers, and Germany has gained in strength and international respect. And yet, the nervosity has prevailed, and so when the Führer promised that the era of surprises is over, this was seized upon as a promise that the Nazi Reich is now going to be focused on consolidation and stability. The first quarter of 1937 shows how the regime converts results into consent. Hitler has given millions of Germans work, prestige, and the appearance of restored sovereignty. In return, many accept the narrowing of law, truth, and conscience. The Enabling Act is renewed as if dictatorship were merely administration. Civil service is bound to Hitler as if loyalty to one man were public duty. Industry is rewarded as if profit from rearmament were patriotic service. Rejection remains present, especially in the Catholic challenge and in private despair, but it is fragmented. Acceptance is organized, broadcast, financially awarded, and made to look like common sense. This is the most dangerous kind of revolution, one that does not barge through the front gates, guns ablaze, to shoot their way to the throne room. That is where it starts, a wannabe king on a throne propped up by only half-hearted support from the counselors around him. A politician armed with a complete disregard for the rules of the game and a narcissistic hubris that insulates him from any hesitation. An orator who knows no difference between his lies and the truth. A bitter leader that has built a following through grievances amplified and fears stoked. A secular pastor preaching magical salvation through the simple act of confronting the past and ridding you of the others whom he tells you are responsible for your woes. Proposing conflict and strife as the only solution. A false messiah that claims he can turn water into wine but delivers neither. Beware of putting the likes of him on the throne, for they will seize power in incremental steps, replacing the minions of the machine with loyalists while bullying and bribing his half-hearted allies into total submission. By the time you notice, they've long since become absolute. They've already stolen the kingdom, cheated their way to the riches of the land, and begun to erect monuments to their vanity and dark cause. Never forget. Join me to expose humanity's victories and defeats in our common past so that we can learn how to find a better future for ourselves and future generations by joining the TimeGhost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. The contributions of the TimeGhost Army are the only thing that keeps our production going.